Good afternoon. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. From London. So fantastic subjects, and I think, you know, for all of us in our different organizations, we're looking at the opportunities for how what digital means for ourselves, for our colleagues, for our partners, and for our customers, our consumers, those to whom we deliver our products and services. So my question today is, are you ready for that change? Are you ready to embrace the opportunities that are there, and to embrace how organizations really work and the human relationships which will actually enable us to succeed through the many digital opportunities which are open to us? So I think, you know, one of the things which strikes me is that clarity in terms of what we're trying to achieve in the time that we have. So I just wanted to kick off with a very short video.
Muted.
Hello there.
Unmuted.
Right. A quick sketch which will give the organization and our colleagues what they need at any time. So part of how we should progress with any digital technology or any change in our business is to be really clear about what it is we're trying to achieve and for whom. And I think what's really interesting here is to start at the head of the organization, or should I say in the head of the organization. And I love this pictorial of the brain of a CEO from some research that IBM conducted a couple of years back, when from a slew of interviews they took with FTSE 250 leaders, they really boiled down all of the metrics and the focuses into three components, and they're all relationship led. The first was about focusing on those innovations and partnerships which are essential to success. Now we've got an interesting situation in the UK at the moment, which some of you will be aware of, and some not, where Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC, can't open their restaurants at the moment. This is the second, possibly into the third day now, in which they've been unable to open their restaurants. Why? Because they've moved to a new supply chain partner, and they're very clear in their communication to the market that it's been the changeover to DHL providing their chicken deliveries, which means that their restaurants are currently shut. So absolutely, we see that importance of having the right partners in place, or in this case, going through the right handover to a new partner. Absolutely critical for the way that they're delivering their products to their consumers. Bit difficult if you can't provide the chicken of KFC, and so that's when it goes wrong. Where we see it going right is organizations looking for the opportunity opportunity to find different ways, better ways of putting their products into the hands of their consumers. And we might think this is always about the right digital journey, but some organizations are saying, do you know what? There are other people who are doing that better for us. If you take, for example, the brand, then they've decided actually they're going to like ASOS in terms of their portfolio of products being delivered to their consumers. They're not going to focus on that website journey themselves. If you look at a global liquor provider like Diageo, then they're experimenting with local providers such as Just Eat in terms of getting their products to their consumers' front doors. So we can see how the importance of partnerships, relationships is so critical to brand performance, understanding the external to succeed. So that's the purple part of the CEO brain on this graphic. You then into the red part of the brain, so that absolute understanding of our consumers. The way that we are learning to behave now is we trust the crowd. So all of the time we look at the crowd in terms of the comments it's making, in terms of the ratings that it's giving. If you think, for example, for buying a product from Amazon, you're looking at the rating, the reviews, the comments. In fact, you might change your settings so that you can only look at products which are 4-star or more out of a maximum of 5 stars. And so we are constantly trusting people who we don't know and will never know to make those ratings for us. Exactly the same with Airbnb, the ratings, etc., etc. The crowd gives us the information. So this is the second focus for our CEOs. What are our consumers saying about us? How can we get involved with those conversations? And then finally, onto the blue part of the brain, what does this mean for those who are actually delivering those products and services, who are working with the consumers, customers, and partners to make this work? What does this mean for our employees, and how are we setting them up for success? So again, you can see all of the metrics, all of the elements of this broad organizational thinking, but at the heart of the dilemma of any CEO at the moment, it is utterly relationship driven and being really clear as to how we can get this network of people and organizations to deliver for the organization. So what does this mean for our organizational purpose? Well, it means that particularly for those of us focused on the people strategy and creating tomorrow's organizations, we have to be really clear about what we are there to do. Are we there to sustain and maintain the organization as it currently is? Or are we there to understand the difference between what we have today and what we will need to have tomorrow to enable the organization to succeed? And that's by having a really clear set out of the strategic framework of our organizations, which shows the pathway from where we are today into what the future state of the organization is going to be. And that might, as we mind that gap, as we look at the difference between the two, it might throw up some really interesting opportunities for us. If you're in the automotive industry, for example, is it about the traditional engineering that has been the difference in terms of all of those incremental gains in the performance of your vehicle, in terms of acceleration, in terms of safety, in terms of top speed, all of those statistics that we're used to looking at, or is it actually now about the digital engineering, about the experience of being in the vehicle, about the different ways that we're looking at power consumption rather than power performance in those vehicles? And that will then completely start to change the people dynamic across the organization, because it will change the talent that's required for your organization to win. And I particularly love this quote from Drucker: "The greatest danger in terms of turbulence," and I think we could all give examples of the turbulence that our organizations are going through, is not the turbulence itself. It's to act with yesterday's logic, to fall back on what we have known to work in the past. And I think, a cautionary tale for all of us would be the fact that, the first digital camera was created by an engineer within Kodak. And Kodak was so focused on being a film business as opposed to what they are, which is a memories business, that they didn't develop that technology, and therefore their competitors progressed it much more quickly than Kodak, to Kodak having to file Chapter 11 against bankruptcy in the US because they couldn't keep pace with the change of their industry. But they had the tools of success in their hands. So I would argue that our opportunity is to engage with and create the future, to understand where our customers and consumers are and how they choose to behave. And the image here is from the Korean underground, and you can see that the grocery shop is just being conducted in an area where there'd be no connectivity, actually just connecting with all of the items on the in the station itself, so that when the consumer gets home, they're going to have those products ready on their front doorstep for them. So we have the opportunity to really engage with and create our future and understand the changes in our relationships and performances that will be required to succeed. So I would argue the best way to predict the future is, of course, to create it. As we go through this cycle of change, I think it's fascinating to understand the cultural paradigm across our organisations, and it's it's just really useful to use this model to think about how that works. We think about our own organisation. We get used to our environments really quickly. Sometimes it's really useful just to try and step back or ask those that are new to the organisation, what do you see as being the rich and routines here? How are you experiencing the control systems, the purchase order system, for example, travel booking system, the expenses system? How are you experiencing those? How are you experiencing the power structures in the organizations? How are you getting stuff done? Do you experience any politics here? What are the barriers to your success? How are the organizational structures working for you? How do you see them playing out? Not on the page, not on the organization chart, but in your experience day to day. What symbols do you see around the business? And so often we see that through really the way that soft power is being experienced. Where can I park my vehicle? What access do I have to senior leaders around here? What access do I have to resources, etc.? So thinking about this particular model and how it's playing out in our organisations, because there's all these forces of change around the business, and I've talked about the importance of our partners. I've talked about the importance of our consumers. But probably the one force that I haven't spoken about is what investors are looking for from our organizations and how that has changed. And so often we focus on some of the lagging indicators of success. So we might talk about sales, for example, critically important, but it's yesterday's news because that money is already banked. Why would I choose to retain my money in your organization? What are the leading indicators of success? So in terms of the measures on my customer measures, my net promoter score, the trust which is outside the organization, that's really important. But also the trust that's inside the organization. How do I know that you have the right talent for tomorrow's challenges? How are you preparing people in terms of their skills and their learning for what needs to be true tomorrow? It might be commercial skills, it might be new technical skills. How are we creating the networks across our organization which will enable success? And this, I feel, is an area where traditional human resources has not been engaged sufficiently in terms of demonstrating to investors the way those leading indicators of success and why they should retain their money in the business. How is that talent being readied? What are the talent sources for the future? what's the, we talk about our research and development in terms of products. What about our research and development in terms of people? So those are some of the forces of change that we see there. And therefore, I think you put all these elements together, and the question to ourselves, engage in our network in order to deliver, who is critical to our success? How have we mapped them? How have we engaged them? How are we communicating with them? What are the metrics using? These are the types of questions that we should be engaging our leaders against and providing clarity so that we can go forward with a surety in terms of our success. Because I would argue that our organizations are much messier than we believe them to be. We do not operate organizations on a page in terms of our traditional org charts. They're very much relationship driven, and there are all types of human relationships that we just don't see when we look in the traditional charts that describe how hierarchies work across our organizations. And this particular graphic shows just some of the things that might be at play in your organization, and how influence is really at work. So, and we'll recognize this. I mean, I've worked in many different organizations. Understanding the power dynamics is really important. Understanding that X and Y are never going to work together on a project because of a long-standing score that they have to settle is very useful in terms of trying to get things done in any organization. How can we understand organizations as they are, not as how we would want them to be? And I think, so that's inside an organization. I think particularly when we're bringing talent into an organization, when we're out recruiting, traditionally we've just looked at the individual, what their skills and experience are, how they would, what they would add to our organization, how they connect within an organization. What we haven't been so strong at is looking at the network that they are part of, the networks that they are part of. And I don't just mean a broad number of how many LinkedIn connections that someone may have, but what they're contributing to. When the going gets tough, who can they call upon to help their thinking? You're not just hiring an individual, you're employing a network, and understanding the networks that you're bringing into your organization, I think. Because where we are is in terms of the innovation that we need to succeed, we need to create environments in which at all levels across the business, innovation, great ideas, ways forward, and progressed, and find ways of working in which we can surface organizations. I'm not talking about a ideas box in the canteen that people can drop comments into. I'm talking about how we actually change the traditional ways of working in our businesses. If we are going into meetings in which the same people are controlling 60% of the words that are spoken, and we have individuals who aren't being heard, aren't being listened to, in fact, who have turned off because they know that they're not going to get their opinions across, then we have to change the dynamics. We have to find different ways. I really appreciate the laugh. Thank you very much. We have to change that way of working across our business, because otherwise we're just experiencing the same old dynamics all of the way through. And I come back to this point at the top of the slide. Ideas don't care who thought them up. We have to find that way of actually creating the best possible environment for innovation and new ways of working to come through. And one example of this is Kibo, and this robot project I think was just absolutely fantastic. So this was putting a small robot called Kibo up on the International Space Station, and part of Kirobo's work was actually to be alongside the Japanese astronauts on the space station, and to be a social companion. I think this is a fascinating way of thinking about the future of technology in our workplaces, that it's not going to just be about giving automation a challenge to deliver some of the sort of hard labor, the manual part of it, but actually working alongside us and supporting us to be the best that we can be as people. And the fascinating end to the Kibo story is that the robot was actually left up on the International Space Station after the Japanese astronauts had returned to Earth. And but of course, with no one to talk to, the robot became lonely because it wasn't able to actually fulfill its function. So then it was important to get Kibo back down to Earth, which I think is a rather interesting end to the story. So for those of us that work in human resources, we might have to think about the welfare of our cobots, our colleague robots, alongside the welfare of our colleagues. So an interesting challenge for the future there. Been very fortunate over recent years to work with the Business Culture Awards, and it's fascinating when you look at all of the Business Culture Awards success stories, all of the winners and the highly commended and the nominees, in terms of how organisations are seeking to grasp with some of these challenges. And if anyone's interested, then please go on the businesscultureawards.com website, and those winning stories are going to be showcased as a series of business breakfasts over the coming weeks. They're completely free, but they are based in London for those for all of our international listeners. But if you're around, take the opportunity to engage with other organisations that are really seeking to advance their culture through some of the challenges that we've been talking about. One of the ways that we've seen that being done is that rather than an executive team just working on tomorrow's challenges themselves, that they actually bring in the future leaders of the organisation, perhaps as a leadership development programme participants, in terms of them being part of the creation of tomorrow's strategies, understanding the changes that are happening in terms of partners, consumers, employees, etc., that we've been talking about, and those future leaders then being part of the creation of tomorrow's strategy when they themselves will be leading the organisation. Today's C-suite will have moved on in 5 years' time. Wouldn't it be more honest to involve those who we believe will be the leaders in the 2020s, for example, to create the strategy for the 2020s? So I think it's so important to embrace our organisations as they are and as they are going to be, understanding the talent that's coming through, the needs of talent that are in place across the organisation, and the way that the organisational networks, with all its messiness, are actually working. The importance of understanding where influence lies, and therefore understanding where we have empty spots across an organisation where we would expect there to be influence, where we would want there to be influence, but there is none. And therefore it's so important to embrace tools such as organisational network analysis to actually understand where influence sits across our organisations and to work with them as they stand. So my final question from all of this is then, how can we use this thinking about the networks both inside and outside of the organisation to support our colleagues to embed the changes that are required to succeed, to have a strong sense of what tomorrow requires from us, and to work accordingly. Well, so those are the points that I wanted to share.
Tim, let me ask you, as my co-presenter today, is there any final comments you'd like to make, a reflection on the second part, or we are just happy to close the event as it is?
No, I mean, just to say, just to thank everyone for taking the time to spend an hour with us, and it's been really interesting just seeing some of the comments and the energy around what will be the future of organisations and how we will enable success in an increasingly digital age. So thank you so much for your time, everyone.